take at my organization is to try and create awareness about social science research, try to create awareness about the importance and utility of social science research. But the chief reason why I am here is because I could not say no to Professor Mishra. And I learned today morning that I am not alone in feeling this way. All of my colleagues, everybody that I met since morning, feel exactly the same. So it's a tribute to your own humility and your persuasion and your goodness, sir, which I must say I have seen in my only visit last time a few months ago. It pervades the entire organization. I've had the opportunity of meeting a few of your colleagues. Dr. Jayashree is there. I've met Dr. Poonam today, Mr. Murthy, Dr. Sarkar. So I certainly think that your personality is very, very clearly pervading through the organization, as is very wont to happen in any think tank, I can tell you. The personality of the leader is a critical dimension of how the organization's values, its cultures, and its norms develop. So I'm not at all surprised, but I thought I must share this with you. Let me begin by saying that I work for an organization which is called IDRC, and to some of the younger people who are in this room, who are more accustomed to Twitter world, would perhaps understand IDRC to stand for I don't really care. But that's not the organization, thankfully, I work with. My organization stands for International Development Research Center. It's a Canadian Crown Corporation, which provides funding, non-funding support to all kinds of research for development in developing countries. And the region that I work at and the region that I look at is the Asia region. Prior to this, I was looking at the Latin America and Africa region. And as Professor Mishra was talking about, one of the tasks that we have taken upon ourselves is to actually cultivate this entire community of researchers who have been making a signal contribution to public policy making, but unfortunately, majority of that remains, if I may say, unsung heroes and actors on the scene. Part of the job is to try and bring visibility to this group of people. Although I must say that I was surprised listening to the prayer today. I didn't know the researchers could also be good singers. But that certainly is a good learning. Now, when I was asked to share with you some of my own thoughts on corporate social responsibility, it gave me satisfaction for two specific reasons. One is, it gave me an opportunity to return to and to reflect upon some of my own experience of having worked in this area, which is about 15 years ago, with a corporate sector, Lalbhai group of companies in Ahmedabad, where there was a lot of work that was done, and I was a member of some of the teams. So I hope to be able to reflect on some of those understandings. It also was opportune for me to be able to use this platform to reflect on some of the things, some of the CSR activities as I saw sitting at Oxford. So, you know, that global perspective, which sometimes can be extremely enriching, was also extremely useful in trying to understand what is this CSR business all about. And sitting in an organization working part-time for them in Oxfam, which is an international charity, which did some very good work in collaboration with the Nike and the Fair Trade Coffee and stuff like that as part of their CSR activity. So I hope to bring some of those experience to this platform. Let me, although, you know, like usual caveat, begin by saying that anything that I share is my personal view and it's not necessarily the view of my organization or any organization that I'm affiliated to. There are three main points that I would like to make, which has been embodied not only in the work of industrialists in the pre-independence era, but also in the religious scriptures. You look at Kautilya's Arthashastra, you look at Ashokan edicts, which talk about not only respect for animals and other beings, but also talks about respect for environment. I mean, it's as old as that, that we have this concept of philanthropy, of respect for nature embodied into our law. Of course, in pre-independence days, many leading Indian industrialists saw themselves first as nation builders, and as as was being quoted a minute ago, and I thought, what was said of Tata was very, very pertinent in that context, where he said, and I quote if I heard it correctly, "What is good for India is good for Tatas." And that's something which was embodied in the industrialists of that era. Not many people know, though, that even the grandfather of Rabindranath Tagore, who was an industrialist, zamindar prince in that era in the mid-19th century, he played a very important instrumental role in setting up of the Brahmo Samaj along with Ram Mohan Roy, and he played a critical role in abolition of sati. Now, the term CSR did not exist, but the practice went beyond philanthropy. This is not philanthropy. This is doing proactively something for the society, something that is being done for the eradication of social ills. What was the motivation? We'll come to that. Now, the distinction I make between philanthropy and what I prefer to call as socially responsible business practices rather than as CSR, and at some point I'll try and explain this, is, philanthropy is an act of giving. It's an act of charity, mostly driven by an individual as opposed to a firm, with a personal value of giving back to society as the principal driver. In traditional family-owned firms, this may take the form of corporate giving, and which is where sometimes CSR and philanthropy begin to get mixed. Socially responsible business practices, however, on the other hand, is more about social responsibility of the firm's operations and activities. So it's not about you earn a profit and then you share it. It's about how you earn your profit, what practices you undertake to earn a profit, what activities you implement for your operations towards earning your profit. Let me not, however, give the impression that these are two neatly categorized set of activities. There are overlaps, clear overlaps. But I wanted to make this distinction particularly in this context because unfortunately both these terms have been used quite interchangeably in common parlance, as I've heard, and also in literature. I was surprised. These terms have been used quite interchangeably. When the CSR law has been now enacted, a lot of philanthropic activities are now going as part of CSR activities or socially responsible business practice activities. And I think it's important, therefore, to keep this distinction in mind, certainly as a group of researchers who I believe have the onus of responsibility to inform, educate, and share our own thoughts and our own understanding on the subject with people who practice. When I worked for this Lalbhai group of companies I was saying, which is about 15 years ago, this company actually engaged in both philanthropic activities as well as what I'm calling as socially responsible business practice. And I'm deliberately not using the term CSR because it creates a bit of a confusion. And so in addition to the fact that this institution set up quite a few textile and management institutions in the city of Ahmedabad and beyond, in Surat, etc., which was again driven by the importance of and the need to one, of course, the commitment to the cause, and there is a lot of literature to suggest how commitment to the cause, maintaining of family traditions, the Gandhian, the ethical value of giving back to the society have been important drivers of some of the industrialists' early actions. And clearly that was very, very visible at that time. So not only setting up of institutions, but also taking care of critically ill patients, medical patients who could not afford treatment and medicines. But in addition, the company went forward and gone beyond philanthropy and began looking at what we are now calling as CSR. So trading of garment workers I don't need to tell you why training of garment workers was in the interest of the company, which was a leading textile and garment manufacturing company in the world. They began doing it, but then it went a step beyond. And that was quite, I remember some of the difficult conversations that some of us had with the senior management, because this was something, I'm talking about 15 years ago. It was not something which was ingrained, certainly not mandated. So it was so difficult to try and get the company to begin to understand that it is in its enlightened self-interest to begin investing in making sure that the neighborhood in which the factories and the companies operate are not on fire. Otherwise, people like me who migrate from Patna and Delhi to come and work in Ahmedabad will not do so. If the city is on fire, you cannot have a world-class company in that city, because you need good people, you need educated people, you need talented people, and not all of that reserve is available locally. You need people who have experience and understanding of the sector. They will not want to come and work for you. They don't have security. They don't have basic facilities. And this was a major challenge, and this was how the company finally began to appreciate the importance of doing something around the vicinity of the factory. And of course, rest, as they say, is history. There's a lot of work that the company did, including developing the physical infrastructure of an area around that, which is now called, well, it was subsequently called Sanjay Nagar. I don't know what it's called now. So there was about 1,100 households whose a lot of basic services were provided to those group of companies. So, when we talk of philanthropy and CSR, one way in which, therefore, CSR could be looked at is philanthropy being the earliest roots and origins of CSR, perhaps not called then exactly as it should have been, but in retrospect, I think we can begin to think of how CSR has evolved in this country. It has evolved from philanthropic roots. It went into social community development, and then subsequently there is a clear need for and now understanding and practices of how CSR needs to become a strategic part of organizational operations and policies. This historical evolution of CSR, however, has not been uniform across firms and certainly not across countries. To give you just one set of data, a recent study that I was going through points to how larger firms have used strategic CSR as a means of product differentiation, leading to higher payoffs in the long run, whereas the smaller ones are still mostly into the business of community development. An analysis of 200 firms for 2013 and 14 in India showed that unlike in developed countries where strategic CSR, the socially responsible business practices, are geared more towards protection and preservation of environment, in India, it is more towards community development, education, and health, which have turned out to be the three major areas of support. The good news on philanthropy, however, is that it is growing. It is not only here to stay, it is growing. And just to, I was kind of attracted by a set of data. So the Bain's India Philanthropy Report was talking about how 14% of adult Indians have begun to donate cash, which has grown from 12% 5 years ago. And that 28% and then 100 million donors, new donors, have been added in the last 5 years to this pool of donors, which I think is all very positive. So having said that, let me now turn to the second thing that I wanted to share with you, which is about the 2% CSR law. As I said, it's an idea whose time, in my view, came a while ago and is now gone. So in my view, therefore, it is a case of missed opportunity. Now, why do I say that? There has, of course, been much fanfare about the 2% CSR law. There is little doubt that the intent and the spirit behind this is welcome. It's very, very welcome indeed, and long overdue. However, a devil could argue that it is like first you sell your soul to make money, and then you donate to charity to cleanse your soul. Let me give you two examples which are currently happening in the world which illustrate this. One is, and I'm sure you're aware of because I've just picked it up from newspapers, the Johnson & Johnson baby powder. Some of you might be aware of how a lady who had been using the Johnson & Johnson baby powder for 24 or 26 years was finally diagnosed with ovarian cancer. And the diagnosis clearly pointed to the use of the Johnson & Johnson baby talc powder, which led to this. And then it subsequently was found that the company knew about this all through and chose to keep it a secret. There is a $72 million suit that the company is at the moment in Missouri. It's been lodged against this. The second example is the Volkswagen automobile. And again, I'm sure you know how the actual carbon emissions of the vehicles, 11 million vehicles of Volkswagen were fudged and not reported accurately. As a result of which we all know that therefore the company was emitting far more pollution than it actually was saying it did. That is irresponsible. That is certainly irresponsible when there's a campaign in this country and in Beijing and in several other cities of the world of how the air that we breathe is become toxic. It's polluting not only to us but to our children. It's harming each and every one of us. It's very interesting, and I learned it only yesterday, that in 2014, Volkswagen published its CSR report, and its CSR report, it goes on to extol the company's commitment to the highest levels of environmental standards. And to give you just one illustration of how it does it, it has used the word environment more than 300 times in a 156 extremely glossy report. And it's all been about how the management is committed to environmental protection and environmental sustainability. Now, do you think anybody who reads this will believe that this is exactly what you want to do? Mahatma Gandhi had said, means are after all everything. As the means, so the end. The glory of Indian independence very significantly draws from the reality that both the principles of ahimsa and of non-violence were critical to how we attained independence. We didn't attain independence by adopting violent means and then having attained independence went around and did something to cleanse our souls and wash our hands of all the guilt of violence that we might have perpetrated in order to gain independence. We didn't do that. We used two very important non-violent ahimsa as two chief weapons, and which goes to the credit of the glory that surrounds the way Indian independence was achieved, and that we know has been followed world over. It's extolled world over. So what am I saying? I'm therefore saying that the 2% law is certainly welcome, but it's more like, if you think of the analogy of a ship moving in water, it's more like you are arranging the chair on the decks. It's not about changing the direction of the ship. To me, when I think of CSR, as we did, for instance, sitting in the global justice team at Oxford, not too long ago, about 5-6 years ago, the key questions that we used to think about CSR was, would this 2% law, for instance, help transform Indian society? Would it address the causes of grave inequality? Or would it truly speak to the entire society as companies' stakeholders? Will it transform the social ills and challenges in education, hunger, malnutrition, food security, etc., etc.? Will it prevent another Bhopal gas tragedy from happening? Or will it prevent Rana Plaza type of tragedy from happening in Bangladesh? Rana Plaza tragedy, just in case you don't know, and it's very fresh in my mind because I'm returning from having attended a meeting in Dhaka only yesterday. Rana Plaza is the worst industrial disaster in Bangladesh's history. In April 2013, a 5-story building, which was all housing garment manufacturing workers, collapsed. And garments, by the way, is the biggest export revenue earner. 65% of export revenues in Bangladesh comes from garments. They employ more than 1.2 million people, of which majority are women. And there are a lot of children who are employed. So this 5-story building collapsed. Why? Because it was structurally insecure.